Welcome to my Product of the Year video. This is where I'm going to go through a bunch of different categories and tell you what I think have been the very best products that I reviewed throughout the last 12 months. And there's a couple of things we need to talk about here. Firstly, not all of these products that I'm going to list are going to be on special. I'm releasing this for Black Friday to help you choose the best products to buy with your hard-earned money, but it doesn't mean that I'm only cherry-picking things that are going to be on sale. Because after all, sometimes it's better to buy a product at full price because it's great, rather than buy a crappy product just because it's got a discount on it. Another thing you might want to know is that some of these products will have affiliate links down in the description below, but it doesn't mean that all of them are affiliate links, and that was not a criteria to get into this list. Instead, the criteria to get into this list was pretty simple. It had to be a product that I've reviewed over the last 12 months, meaning from about early November of 2024 through to early November of 2025. And then, as I read through the list of all of the products that I've reviewed, I had to have a sense of warmth and regard for the product for it to make this list. I had to look at it and think, is that a product that I would want to pick up and use again today? And if I felt a strong urge that yes, I would, it made the list. If I looked at it and went, yeah, it's okay, it didn't make the list. That doesn't mean that products not appearing in this video are somehow suddenly bad. It might just mean that there are other products that are equally as good, and therefore one doesn't particularly stand out over the other. All the products I'm about to list for you stand out to me as being wonderful examples of a product in their category at their price. And now a couple more things before we dive into the list is make sure you stay tuned, because at the very end of this, I'm going to tell you which one is my ultimate Product of the Year winner. The product of all products, regardless of category, that I think deserves the award of my favorite product of the year. And finally, one last thing, for almost all products I'm going to talk about here, I'll put a QR code on the screen that you can scan to jump straight through to the review of that product. Of course, if you're watching this on your phone, that's going to make it difficult, but if you're watching it on a TV screen, you could pause this video and use your phone to scan the QR code and quickly check out my review of that product if you need to know more about it. And if you are watching it on your phone and you can't do the whole QR code thing, all you need to do to find out more about one of those products is just search here on YouTube for Passion for Sound and the name of the product. So Passion for Sound, Noble Audio Focus Apollo. And yes, that is a product coming up in just a second. So that's all you have to do. Other than that, sit back, enjoy, and you can use all the links in the description down below to help you buy any of these products if you want to do so. Now, let's dive into the list, and we're working our way up the signal chain, meaning that we're going to start with things like headphones and speakers and work our way back up through amplifiers, headphone amplifiers, and eventually things like DACs and streamers. And that means we're going to kick it off with wireless products. The first wireless product I'm going to mention here is the Noble Audio Focus Apollo wireless headphones. These are a wireless active noise cancelling headphone that sounds great, but they sound even better if you attach a pair of the Dekoni audio pads for them. And so my specific recommendation with the Noble Audio Focus Apollos is that you buy them and you buy a set of the Dekoni pads to go with them. That should come in at a retail price, if nothing's on special, at $739 US, but thanks to Dekoni Audio being a regular sponsor of the channel, I'm able to offer you a 10% discount on the pads. And that means you can buy the whole set for $730 US or less if it's on a Black Friday sale. But if you want the 10% discount on the pads, or anything else from Dekoni for that matter, you will need to use the code PassionForSound10 at DekoniAudio.com. So make sure you do that if you're buying pads or any other accessories from Dekoni, and happy hunting for discounts on all the other products. The other wireless product I want to mention here is one that I haven't produced a review for yet, but I think it'll be out before you see this video, and that's the Final Audio Tonalite IEMs. These offer some incredible technology that's amazingly impactful on the listening experience, and I've covered off all of what that means in the review, but suffice to say they're the best wireless earphone that I think I've heard, probably ever. And so that's it for wireless earphones and headphones. Remember, check out the reviews either through the QR codes or by searching Passion for Sound, Final Audio Tonalite. And now, let's stick with the portable theme, but start getting into more wired devices. We're going to start things off with the FiiO M21, which comes in at $330 US for a fantastic digital audio player that can do just about anything, I think. It's a player for local files, it's a streamer, it'll load any of the apps for any of the streaming services you want, it's got Bluetooth receiving, Bluetooth transmission, it can be a DAC and a headphone amp, you get the idea. So the FiiO M21 kicks us off, and as you can see, I'm going to move this through pretty fast so we don't bog down too much, and that means we're going to move on now to the Cayin RU9. This is a portable DAC and headphone amp that's also got Bluetooth receiving capabilities, and it also has a built-in set of tubes. You can have the tubes full on, partially engaged in the circuit along with some solid state magic, or go pure solid state if you want to. It's a premium device, it sounds great, it's MagSafe compatible so it'll stick to the back of your phone, and it's absolutely beautiful. And that wraps up portable audio. Although we've got one other portable product coming up later because it kind of straddles a couple of different categories, so stay tuned for that one. And now we're going to start getting into the full-sized wired system type products, starting with full-size speakers. Well, I say full-size speakers, but I'm actually starting off with a really compact active speaker in the form of the Adam Audio D3Vs. For $350 US, these blew my mind with the soundstage they were able to produce and the general sound quality as well. I absolutely adore the little D3Vs. They do need a sub if you want to go really, really deep with the bass, but even without a sub, they're thoroughly enjoyable. And as it happens, their bigger sibling, the A7Vs, also makes this list. In other words, they're also from Adam Audio. The A7Vs come in at $1,800 US for a pair, and they're another active speaker, meaning you don't need to buy speaker amps or anything like that. You just need a DAC or some sort of source that's outputting an analog signal to plug into the back of the A7Vs, and that's all you need. What made the A7Vs really stand out this year was the level of customization you can create with specific room measurements, with adjustments built into the speakers. You can make sure that the sound of the speakers in your room is just perfect. And so those were my other favorite speaker in that active speaker range. But then if we get into the passive speaker world, I've got one pair to share with you here as my product of the year in the speaker category, and that's the ProAc Response D2R speakers. These retail for just over £3,600, which is about $4,800 US, and they're a magnificent sounding passive speaker. If you've watched the channel for a while, you'll know that I don't do a lot of speaker reviews, and that means that the ProAcs admittedly didn't have a lot of competition this year, but the fact that I felt compelled to buy a pair after I reviewed them tells you just how special I think they are. And if you are looking for more speaker reviews, be sure to hit the subscribe button, because just in case you haven't seen, I'm in the process of setting up a brand new studio, and that studio is going to finally give me the space to do proper full-size 2-channel reviews, meaning power amps, preamps, floor standing speakers, large stand mount speakers, you name it, I'll be able to do it soon. So hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for some very exciting times. But now we're going to move on to headphones and earphones, and we're going to kick that category off with the Tipsy Audio M1s. These are a $99 US REM from a Chinese brand that was founded by an audio engineer. In other words, this is a brand that was founded by somebody that understands the world of music professionals, recording music, live music monitoring. This is a person that gets it, and you can hear it even in the affordable $99 Tipsy M1, but also up through the rest of their range as well. It's a magnificent IM and definitely one to check out. However, if you have a bit more money to spend, another IM worth checking out is the Dita Audio Prelude. It's only $159 US, so not much more than the M1s, and it's another fantastic choice. I wouldn't say it's better than the M1s, just different. Different design, different look, different feel, different sound. So check both of those out. They're both worthy of product of the year consideration from me. And that brings us now to full-sized headphones in the form of the FiiO FT1 and the FiiO FT1 Pro. The FT1 is a $165 US closed-back dynamic headphone, and the FT1 Pro is a $210 US open-back planar magnetic headphone. So different designs, different sounds, but both fantastic and both excellent value for money. And by the way, you might notice that all the prices I'm listing here are the full retail prices. As I said at the opening, I haven't tried to cherry pick products that are on special here. I just wanted to tell you the fantastic products on the market, and then you can decide if you want to buy them at full price or try to hunt down the bargains where possible. From the two FiiO headphones, we're going to take a bit of a jump now and look next to the HEDD. These are a $799 US dynamic headphone that's incredibly transparent and honest to the music. It's quite a neutral tuning, but a very enjoyable one, and reports say that it responds extremely well to EQ. And so it's gotten the nod to get into this product of the year list because it is so very good at what it does. And you might notice that we made quite a jump then and we skipped a whole lot of other headphones. There's been the Meze 105 AER, the Meze 105 Silvers. I've skipped those because whilst they're both fantastic headphones, there's other headphones around the same price that are also excellent. And so I'm only including things here that really stood out to me as unique, different, and somehow exceptional. And that brings us to the next headphone, which is the SJY Audio Horizon Closed Carbon. For $1,099 US, these are a magnificent closed-back headphone, one of the best you can buy for the price. And I think they're definitely one that everybody should consider if you're in the market for a great closed-back headphone around about the price. But if you've got even more money to spend, and we're starting to get into the big bucks now, we do have a Meze Audio headphone in this list, and it's the Meze Audio Poet. At $2,000 US, I think the Poets might be my all-time favorite Meze Audio headphone. That doesn't mean they're better than the Elites or the Empyrean or Empyrean 2 if you like the Empyrean 2, which I don't like so much. But the Poets to me are an absolute joy. They're gorgeous to wear, they're gorgeous to look at, and to me, they sound fantastic. They're a headphone that I'll reach for and put on if I just want to get lost in the enjoyment of the music. Although, having said that, if I really want the absolute maximum enjoyment listening experience, the headphone I do actually reach for, because it's even better again than the Poets, is the Bandoss Avija Precision headphone. These retail for around about $5,860 US, because they're actually listed in euros, I think, from memory. But they're a serious investment in the headphone world, they're a true flagship, and they perform accordingly. To me, they're the best headphone that I've ever put on my head. And that makes them a really perfect way to round out the products of the year in the headphone category and lead us into a really short interlude. I want to talk to you really quickly about some cables. If your blood pressure just went up a few notches when I said cables, you can use the chapter markers down below to skip forward a step. But I really quickly want to talk about some IEM cables that I've looked at this year. I've covered a whole bunch of different Effect Audio cables, like their Signature series, and I've also just recently received their Code 23 Mark II, if I can untangle it, which is this guy here, which is a pure copper cable, their Code 24 Mark II, which is a silver-plated copper cable, and their Fusion 1 cable, the 2025 version. And each of these offers a different type of flavour to the sound. The Code 23 Mark II is the smoothest sound of all three because it's a pure copper cable, and it's basically going to give you the same sound as an IEM that came with a pure copper cable, except it's all going to be better. More detail, more resolution, but no changes in tonality. Then if you want a little bit more bite and energy in the sound, a little bit more clarity you could call it, that's where the Code 24 Mark II, the silver-plated copper version, comes into play. It's much like the Code 23, but with just a little bit more bite, energy, and clarity. Or if you want to balance somewhere in between the two, the Fusion 1 is like the perfect blend. It uses multiple different metals within the wire, and the result is a sound that's got the body and weight of the Code 23, with some of the clarity and attack of the Code 24, but it balances both beautifully, and also goes beyond both with some of the best separation and imaging clarity of any IEM cable that I've ever attached to an IEM. And on top of that, you can get a discount of 15% off any of those cables, and indeed any of the Effect Audio cables, except for their Centurion range. All you need to do is go to effectaudio.com and use the code PFS15 Effect Audio, and you'll get 15% off any of the cables, except the Centurion range. However, this is not an ad for Effect Audio. It's a chance for you to get a discount if you're in the market for their cables. But I also want to tell you about a different brand IEM cable really quickly. I've talked about the Zikamn Audio Tiber cable a few times on the channel, both in the dedicated review, but also when I've talked about using it with other IEMs, and it's still my go-to cable of choice on the FiiO Audio Radon 6 Customs. To me, the Tiber cable from Zikamn Audio is a little bit like the Fusion 1, but just toned back a tiny little bit. And on an IEM like the Radon 6, where I don't need any extra clarity, I find the Tiber cable to be the perfect balance point. It's also very soft, very supple, and therefore very comfortable, and I just love using it. And so whilst I do love the Effect Audio cables, and I use them a lot on other IEMs, it's the Zikamn Audio Tiber cable that is staying plugged in to my Radon 6s. And therefore, the Zikamn Tiber cable had to be included as a Product of the Year candidate. But let's move on from cables now and start talking about speaker amps. Kicking us off, we've got the $699 SMSL PAX amp. This is a very simple, and I mean that in a good way, a very simple stereo speaker amp that can also be used with two of them in a mono mode if you want to. It's built on gallium nitride technology, it sounds fantastic, and it's just a really good solid option. You might notice that we've jumped straight up to $700 US, meaning that we've bypassed all of the really cheap Class D amplifiers on the market, and that's largely because they're basically interchangeable. There's not been a standout for me in the cheap speaker amp range that I would jump for and say this is better than all the rest, or at least not in the pure speaker amp range, and you'll know what I mean by that in just a moment. Before we get to that though, let's talk about some other dedicated speaker amps, starting with the LAiV GaNM monoblocks. These retail for $4,494 US, that's for a pair of them, and they look and sound fantastic. They're particularly great if you're pairing them up with the rest of LAiV Audio's fantastic gear, like the Harmony DAC and the HP2A headphone amp and preamp, but with any system, they're going to look and sound great. Or if you'd like to spend even more money and you want to use the same exact speaker amps that I use here and just absolutely swear by, that would be the Burson Audio Timekeeper Voyager amps. I'm using the max version of those amps, meaning that you're also getting the dedicated Fusion Core power supply, and that's going to set you back $5,999 US. But you're going to get some of the best amplification around without going completely crazy in terms of price and size. The Voyagers are relatively compact for the power and the performance they put out, and I really love them for that. But we need to keep this moving or we'll be here all day, so let's now start talking about headphone amps. And I'm going to kick this off with the Apos Gremlin. For $120 US, this is a hybrid tube and solid state amp that's also fully balanced. It sounds great, it looks cool, and you can stack it with both the Merlin DAC and or the brand new Druid DAC, which is an R2R DAC with swappable op amps. I haven't heard that one yet, so I'm not formally recommending it here, but the nice thing is you can use the Gremlin on its own or with either of those stackable DACs. If we move up a bit, or actually quite a lot, we can then also talk about the Aune S17 Pro EVO. At $799 US, this replaced the previous Aune S17 Pro, and I think it was a nice, if subtle, improvement. It's a lovely, natural, organic sounding headphone amp and preamp. It's got plenty of power, it looks great, it's just an absolute joy to use. However, for a few dollars more, up to $850 US, you could buy yourself what I think of as the greatest headphone amp that I've ever plugged into. And that's not hyperbole, I honestly mean that. The niche Pitus Maximus is unbelievably enjoyable and engaging. It's only single-ended, in other words, there's no balanced outputs. It's a fairly simple design, but it just sounds sublime. And so it had to be in this list. It's not the last word in technical performance, but it might be the last word in pure enjoyment. However, if technical performance is more what you're after, you might consider the LAiV HP2A headphone amp and preamp. It retails for $2,700 US, it's gorgeous, it sounds great, it's technically very strong, and it's an excellent preamp as well. It looks great, stacked with the LAiV Harmony DAC, and as I said before, paired up with those LAiV GaNM monoblocks. It can make a lovely, simple and compact system for a 2-channel setup. And then the final headphone amp in this list is the Chord Alto. It's more expensive again at $4,320 US, but it's so clean, so dynamic, and so compact at the same time that it's a very, very enjoyable headphone amp to use and to have on your desk. It's also a preamp and even a speaker amp as well, although I wouldn't recommend it specifically as a speaker amp. It'll do the job, but I think its strength is very much as a headphone amp. And so now we're going to take a really short sidestep into what I would call audio tweaks, and I've only got one to talk about here, which is the range of virtual hi-fi op amps. I reviewed these a while ago. They're a fair bit cheaper than really premium op amps like the Burson V7s or the Sparco's SS3602s, but the virtual hi-fi op amps were incredibly impressive to me. So much so that I've continued to go to them and use them in various other product reviews since, such as products like the Fozzy Audio ZH3 or ZD3. They're just brilliant in those sorts of applications. And just to be clear, that doesn't mean that the Burson and Sparco's op amps aren't still even better, but I haven't reviewed those this year, so they're not in the running for product of the year. If we move on now, we're starting to get into what I'm going to call DAC amp combos. But specifically first, we've got a DAC and speaker amp combo. It's the SMSL AS400. This is essentially an updated version of the Raw HA1 speaker amp and DAC, which was a product that I already was regularly recommending. The AS400 costs a little bit more than the Raw HA1, but for your extra money, you're getting a headphone stage that's actually usable, and on top of that, you're also getting a phono stage. So you could pair something like the AS400 with a entry-level budget turntable that has a phono pre-out, as in one that hasn't already been amplified, and you've got yourself a really nice simple system. Of course, if you're not interested in using the headphone stage or the phono stage, the Raw HA1 is also still an excellent choice and does cost a little bit less. It might also be on deeper discounts for Black Friday, so check that one out too. Moving now into DAC and headphone amp combos, we're going to kick this off with a tiny product in the form of the M20 from SMSL. For $130 US, this thing is absolutely tiny, but absolutely brilliant. It's quite powerful, it sounds great, it's very clean, very detailed, and looks fantastic too. But then for those of you that might like a slightly warmer, richer, and less detail-focused sound, there's also the FiiO K11 R2R. It costs a little bit more at $176 US, but it gives you that warm, rich R2R sound that I know some people love. And in case you're wondering, the K13 R2R is not in this list because I haven't properly reviewed it yet. I've had a very brief listen, and to be honest, I don't know if it would make this list even if I had reviewed it, but it'll take the full review to work that out for sure, so hit the subscribe button if you want to know where the K13 R2R sits in my world. But for now, we're going to keep moving. The next product is actually products because it's two that I consider to be basically identical, and that's the SMSL Raw MDA1 and the Topping DX5 Mark II. The Raw MDA1 retails for $280 US, the DX5 Mark II for $299 US. And the reason I'm putting them here on level pegging is that I think they sound as good as identical. There may be a slight difference between them, but not enough to worry about. And so I think you can choose whichever one you prefer the look of, the brand of. But do keep in mind that the DX5 Mark II does give you some EQ capabilities, which the Raw MDA1 doesn't. And I also personally prefer the interactions or the interface with the DX5 Mark II. But on pure sound quality, it's an absolute coin toss. And from there, we're going to jump up a little bit to the FiiO K17. It retails for $990 US and is a combination of a fantastic DAC, a fantastic headphone amp, a fantastic preamp, and a mediocre streamer. It's okay, but it's not great. It's also very limited in functionality. But if you put the streamer aside and think of it as just a convenience inclusion, the rest of it still makes the FiiO K17 incredible value for money. It goes toe-to-toe with dedicated DACs like the Geshelli J3 Pro, the Schiit Mimir 2, and even the LAiV Micro DAC. And yet, the K17 has a headphone amp and preamp capabilities too. And then from there, we're going to take a large jump up to the Burson Conductor GT4. The version I've got here and that I've reviewed is the $3,999 US max version. That means it's coming with the Burson V7 Vivid op amps, they're the premium ones, and also the dedicated Fusion Core power supply. It's an incredibly capable, powerful, and enjoyable all-in-one DAC, headphone amp, and preamp, and it's going to be very hard to beat at the price. Although, Burson Audio have also just released the Conductor Voyager series, and I've got the review of that one coming up very soon. There's a good chance it's going to be significantly better again, so be sure to subscribe if that's the kind of product that you might be interested in. And from here, before we start talking about DACs and streamers, I've got one more really quick interlude, and that's to talk about interconnects. Again, if your blood pressure just went up and you're starting to feel grumpy now, just jump forwards a chapter and I'll see you soon. For those that want to know about the best interconnects on the market based on what I reviewed this last year, I'm going to start things off very affordable. At $47 US for a 6-foot pair, the world's best cable pro range of interconnects are amazing value for money. They sound great, they're very affordable, and they're very well made. But do make sure you stick to the pro range because I've found their standard range can be pretty hit and miss. In terms of sound quality, the build quality is fine, but sound is sometimes pretty mediocre depending on the wires used. And in fact, I think the world's best cable Pro Series interconnects are so good that I wouldn't recommend that anybody go any higher than them until you've spent a few $1,000s on the rest of your system. At that point, you might want to make sure you've got an interconnect that's giving you the maximum possible performance from the investment you made. And that's where I was really impressed this year with the RiCable Invictus Reference XLR cables. These aren't cheap at €862 for a 1 meter pair, but the performance of them was absolutely outstanding. And so those are an interconnect that I would recommend for anybody playing at the serious end of hi-fi. If you've started to spend a couple of $1,000s on each of your components, that's where the RiCables are going to help to make sure you're hearing everything those components have to offer. And then if you've gone even higher still, I have to mention here the incredibly impressive Angel Acoustics Transcendence XLR cables. I believe you can also get them in RCA as well, but I've only heard the XLRs. These are a cost no object interconnect, and the sound quality they deliver is only subtly better than the Rai cables, but it's enough that it's definitely worth it if you're looking to get the absolute best out of your system. They're incredibly well made, they sound beautiful, and they had to be included here. But now, let's talk about the other end of what's going to connect to those interconnects, and that means we're talking DACs. This list has to begin with the incredible FiiO Mimir DAC. At $299 US, this is literally beating other products that are up to $1,000 or more. So we're talking about products like the Geshelli J3 Pro, the FiiO Bifrost 2, the LAiV Micro DAC. Basically, if it's in that range, anywhere up to about $1,000 or a little bit over it, the Schiit Mimir DAC is probably beating it. In fact, based on what I've heard, it's definitely beating it. And so that had to go in the list. It's an absolute game changer, and I'm both scared and excited to see what FiiO has coming next. But I also don't want to completely discount the options such as the Geshelli J3 Pro. Yes, the Mimir DAC can technically outdo it in some ways, but the J3 Pro has its own benefits. It's a lovely DAC, and you can change the op amps in it to give it different character of sound. Whilst the Mimir does have EQ capabilities with the fork bit add-on, it's never going to be something where you can just change the character of the sound so much as just the frequency response. And so the J3 Pro gets an inclusion here for $530 US. It gives you the ability to start there and grow and change by swapping the op amps later if you want to. Or you can spend significantly more money, which you'll have to get better than the J3 Pro or the Mimir, and jump up to the topping D900. This was the first topping DAC in as long as I can remember that properly impressed me. So much so that it's been sitting on my desk ever since and it hasn't left, and there's no plans for it to. That said, there is another DAC that I would have replaced it for, if not for the fact that it's very large and it only has one pair of XLR outputs. That's the strength of the D900 for me, is I love having two pairs of XLR outputs. But if you don't need that and you want an even better DAC, and in fact one of the very best DACs on the market today within a reasonable budget, then it's got to be the Gustart X30. For $3,000 US, the Gustart X30 goes toe-to-toe with any other DAC on the market, even up to the level that it almost catches up to something like the Chord Dave for, I think, $12,000 US. And so the X30 is mind-blowingly good. The R30 is also very good, but it's only the X30 I'm including in this list. And if you want to know why, you'll need to go watch that review. And so we're almost at the end now. I want to make one more tiny quick interlude to mention the Rai Cable Supreme HDMI Mark II cable, which is an optimized audio-focused HDMI cable for I2S transmission. It's absolutely brilliant if you want a great sounding I2S connection within your system. So that one I just wanted to quickly mention because it might be the bridge between your DAC and maybe your DDC. A DDC like the LAiV Micro DDC. And in case you wonder why I keep saying DDC, DDC stands for Digital to Digital Converter. In other words, these are products that sit between your source device, maybe a streamer, and your DAC, and what they'll do is convert and often improve the digital sound. I won't go into the ins and outs here of how they improve the sound. I've done that in my review of the Micro DDC, but all you need to know is that the LAiV Micro DDC is designed in such a way that you can plug any digital input into it that you like, things like USB, I2S, coaxial, I think there's AES in there as well, and it's going to convert any of those inputs into an I2S output. So it's great if you do have a system running on I2S, it's going to potentially improve that sound and maybe give you the ability to convert from multiple different sources into one single connection to your DAC. And speaking of multiple different sources, let's talk about streamers. We're going to kick this off with the Eversolo DMP A6 version 2, which is an update to the original A6, and it made everything about the original A6 better. For $859 US, this is a beautiful little device with a fantastic interface, and as I said, it's just all improvements over the original A6. So much so that if you're just using the streaming stage and you're not using the built-in DAC and analog outputs of the Eversolo streamers, I would choose the A6 version 2 over the more expensive A8. However, if you don't want to spend money on a streamer that's got a built-in DAC that you're maybe not going to use, and you've got a bit more money to spend, I've got two excellent options for you. The first being the Volumio Revo Plus with its accompanying Lineo 5 power supply. Together, these will set you back around about €1,600, and I definitely think it's worth getting the Lineo 5 power supply with the Revo Plus. It does improve the sound, and it brings the Revo Plus to a level that I think it's just as good as the Eversolo T8, which is my other inclusion here. The T8 retails for $1,380, so it is a bit cheaper than the Volumio setup, and it also gives you a lovely touchscreen interface that's wonderfully intuitive. In fact, I considered whether or not the T8 would bump the Revo Plus out of this list, and it very nearly did, but I recognise that some people might want a streamer that is much more subtle, much more simple, and much more compact, if you ignore the fact that it's got a great big linear power supply down on the floor. But if all you want to see in your rack is a nice, slim, streaming box without flashy displays, the Revo Plus is excellent. However, if you want a touchscreen interface, showing album art and things like that, the Eversolo T8 is brilliant too. And that almost wraps us up, but while we're talking about players and transport and music sources, I've got two CD players / transports to tell you about quickly. The first is the SMSL PL200T, which is a $499 CD transport. And when I say transport, it means it doesn't have a built-in DAC. It's got digital outputs that you need to feed to an external DAC. But in doing so, you're going to get yourself a lovely, sleek, and I think stylish looking CD player or CD transport that you can pair up with your existing DAC, headphone amp, speaker amp, etc. The PL200T also offers the ability to connect up things like a master clock, and if you're wondering if that's of any benefit, I've got that video coming up pretty soon, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see how the PL200T could get integrated into a full system with a master clock included. But then if you're after something that's more of a CD player, but it also can be a CD transport, that's where the Shanling EC0T comes into the picture. At $589, this is a portable CD player and CD transport that can also be a USB DAC and headphone amp, and it sounds fantastic. It's got a beautiful built-in R2R DAC, as well as a headphone stage that's great and has switchable tubes that you can have in or out of the circuit, and it's just a lovely, lovely unit to listen to. It's great as a CD player, it's great as a CD transport, and it's even great as a USB DAC and headphone amp. And so the EC0T rounds out the list here. If you haven't seen the review, there's also the lower model EC0 and the FiiO DM13 as other options in the portable CD race, but the EC0T was the clear standout to me. And so that brings us to the end of all the categories and all of the products that I consider to be products of the year within their category. But now we have to work out which is my ultimate product of the year. Regardless of which category it's in, which product do I love the most from everything I reviewed this year? And so I started this process by listing out the products that I thought of as being the absolute standouts. Again, regardless of category, regardless of price. The list that I came up with, in no particular order, was the Cayin RU9, the Shanling EC0T, the Schiit Mimir, the FiiO K17, and the Niche Pitus Maximus. And I have to say it was a really hard choice here because I love each of these products for different reasons. But I think if you line them up in front of me and you said that you were going to take away all but one of them and I had to choose the one that I wanted to keep forevermore, my win of product of the year is going to go to the Niche Pitus Maximus. I can't overstate how incredibly enjoyable this product is, and of all of those different products that I just listed, it is the one that I would be the most upset not to get my hands on. There are other great DACs on the market. There are other great portables on the market. There are other great all-in-ones on the market. But I don't think there's any other amp that's as fun as the Niche Pitus Maximus. There are other amps that might offer better technical performance, but I don't think anything's going to offer you so much fun. So congratulations to Niche Audio for creating the Niche Pitus Maximus, along with Schiit Audio because it was a collaboration. You have produced an absolute gem there, and that is my product of the year. So thanks everyone for watching. I'll let YouTube recommend a video here that it thinks is going to be best for you to watch next. But until next time, peace, love, and music, and I'll see you again soon.